Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. Others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to Movie Oubliette, the movie review podcast, with me, Dan, down in Melbourne, Australia.
And me, Conrad, up in Cambridge, UK.
So in this podcast, we'll be mainly taking a look at fantastical cinema, so horror, sci-fi, and fantasy, all the good stuff, really.
You haven't got a list of things this time.
No, no list this time. Just the good stuff.
Just the good stuff.
How have you been, Conrad?
I've been very well. I've been sort of getting into the Christmas spirit. I know it's probably a bit early, isn't it? We had our local Christmas fair here in the cathedral. Yes, wandering around looking at festive foods and treats and handmade gifts and decorations and things in the cathedral with fairy lights and choral music. So yeah, I'm getting excited already.
I always love Europe. Really it has a tradition for Christmas. It's been going for hundreds and hundreds of years. Whereas in Australia, we're in the wrong season, so we'll be going through. All the shops will have snow and snowflakes and snowmen, and it's 35 degrees outside, and everyone's walking around in shorts and t-shirts. So it does feel a bit wrong.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you still send each other cards with snow and robins and...
Yeah, we do. Yeah. It's still exciting, though. Yeah. I still love Christmas.
So how about you? What have you been up to?
I went to a very hipster Melbourne art exhibition party last night with my good friend Amy. She organised the whole thing. And I actually, I did a sound installation for it, but it was just on an iPod with headphones. So it was, I guess, a sound art piece. So that was the first time I'd done that before. So that was fun.
Yeah, cool.
I felt very trendy. I felt very hip. So, Conrad, anything in the mailbag today?
Well, we do have one question from a new avid listener, Clive. Hello, Clive.
Hi, Clive.
And he says that he was wondering if Dan has been on another podcast called Mysterious Universe, because recently there was a Dan from Australia who is a sound design expert who was on Mysterious Universe, and he sounded like you. Was it you?
It was not me.
No?
But I'm really curious to find out who this guy is. I mean, maybe he's trying to be me. Maybe he heard me. He's my imitator. I don't know.
There is more than one sound designing Dan in Australia.
Yeah. I will check it out.
That is a mysterious universe.
It is. So, Conrad, what film are we going to be taking a look at today?
Oh, I don't know. I will just get on my horse and trot over to the oubliette to find out.
Oh.
Whoa, boy. Oh, my God. There's a hawk in here.
Watch out.
Ow, it's getting in my hair.
Yikes.
I'm slamming it shut again now.
This is not unlike escaping mother's womb. God, what a memory.
Oh, wow. It's always eventful when we open the oubliette these days.
Yeah, it's a bit of a zoo in there.
It really is. Okay, so the film that we have to look at today is a 1985 sword and sorcery fantasy movie called Ladyhawke.
Ooh.
It's directed by Richard Donner, he of Superman and The Omen and Goonies and the Lethal Weapon trilogy. And it stars Matthew Broderick as Philippe Gaston, or the Mouse. He's a petty thief and trickster who escapes from the dungeons of the evil Bishop of Aquila, John Wood, and finds himself travelling with Rutger Hauer, the disgraced former captain of the guard. Etienne of Navarre is his name, who travels with a very fancy horse and, oddly, a hawk, which disappears at night time, as does Navarre, seemingly to be replaced by Michelle Pfeiffer as Isabeau of Anjou, a mysterious and beautiful woman, and a wolf. And as the movie progresses and they come across the disgraced former monk, Imperius, there's a lot of disgraced former things in this movie, yes. Who explains that Navarre and Isabeau are the victims of the bishop's evil curse because he fell in love with Isabeau and couldn't have her for himself. He doomed the couple so that by day, Navarre is a man and Isabeau is a hawk, and by night, Navarre is a wolf and Isabeau is a human being. So they will, although they are lovers, they will never be together. But Imperius, the disgraced former monk, has a prophecy that there will be a moment when there is neither day nor night, and the two of them can be together and face the bishop, and if they do so, the curse will be broken. So with Philippe the mouse as their guide, they head back towards the castle for a final confrontation.
Sounds like a really, really great film.
It does, doesn't it? Shall we find out if it is?
Let's.
Okay, let's take a break and be back in a moment. And we're back. Dan, you hadn't had the pleasure of Ladyhawke previously. I had. I saw it once on VHS back in the day. But I haven't watched it recently, probably not in 20 years or something. Right. What were your first impressions? What do you think?
Okay, so I guess we have to address the glaring element of the film that just does not go. I don't know whether you agree, but the music choices were horrible. I understand. It's a fantasy film. You expect orchestral score, but having 80s synth rock playing over like in the 13th century, was it France or Italy?
I think it's Italy, yeah.
Yeah, with knights on horseback and people turning into wolves and hawks, and then having synth score and like 80s drums. It just did not go at all. And so every time the music would kick in for an action scene with this terribly cheesy 80s rock music, I ended up just groaning and just slapping my face and just being just overall disappointed at how terrible the scene was, essentially only because of the music. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's great that you've just addressed the elephant in the room with this movie. Let's say the music is divisive. In my case, this might be a new thing for the podcast. This might be the only time you hear me getting really quite white hot with rage because this music is fucking awful. I hate it with a passion. And apologies to Andrew Powell, who composed this. He's very accomplished writer and producer and composer who's worked in a wide range of fields, but probably is most famous for his involvement in the Alan Parsons Project. See, I would take issue with it being 80s because I see a lot of people saying, oh God, that awful 80s soundtrack. I think it's actually kind of late 70s prog rock. I think in the 80s, we'd sort of moved on. It sort of sounds dated for 1985 to have this kind of splashy acoustic drums, synthesizer brass noises, and that horrible fretless guitar bass sample bouncing around with really high, brittle, echoey strings over. So it sounds like terrible music, like really awful 70s music. And it just tears me straight out of whatever mood it was that they were trying to create in any given scene. Yeah. in the opening where the mouse is escaping the dungeon, there's this really what could have been great scene where he falls, he's almost out, and then he falls into the water and he finds himself sort of swimming through these tunnels underwater to try and find a way out, and he's running out of breath, and it would be really quite tense and mysterious and exciting, but the music doesn't do any of those things. It doesn't build tension. It doesn't create the environment. It does nothing. It's this mid-paced rock, bass and drum track with electric piano over the top, and it's just sort of bumbling along and sort of boom, boom. You just think, what the fuck is this? It's terrible. Oh,
yeah, I would agree. It's as I think I mentioned, all the action, especially all the action scenes in the first half of the movie with the synthy, terribly cheesy. And also always in a major key as well. When it should be action music, it should be tense, it should be dissonant, it should be blaring, it should be something that's exciting. But instead it's just really cheesy, almost fall to the floor drums. And it destroys all tension and all suspense and all action and anything that was established visually in the scene, and makes it comedic.
Yeah.
It makes the scenes actually hilarious, and they shouldn't be. He's killing people. He's in sword fights. People are at peril.
People are dying here.
Yeah. I just don't understand how. Okay. I mean, I have to say, yes, it's a fantasy. It's expected to be orchestral, and there have been other movies set in the past in historical eras that have incorporated modern music. I think of Marie Antoinette has a lot of very indie rock tracks, and I think that fits. Also, A Knight's Tale has a bunch of Queen songs in there, but they've kind of arranged it so that it fits, and I think it does fit. And same with Moulin Rouge as well. But with this, I don't know, because there was also the combination, there was orchestral scoring as well, and all of that stuff, amazing.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
But then the rock 80s, 70s stuff would come back, and it would just, it was excruciating to watch.
It really was, yeah. The film sort of has the three-act structure. There are three parts to the movie, and thank God there is actually a huge chunk in the middle where the rock goes away. And Andrew Powell himself has said he got so much criticism over the rock part of the score, and he said the rock's only 15%. I would argue that it's more than that. But the second act of the film, where you're sort of getting to know the relationships between the characters and what their situation is, what their motivations are, the rock goes away and you move into synth-embellished orchestral music, which, yes, is very 80s, but it's good. And I was so angry the first time I watched it because I really wanted to feel something for these characters. And every time I was going to, on came this bloody soundtrack. And it was like a sword through a stained glass window. It was just destroyed every mood. But during the middle portion, it actually settles down and all this sort of cheesy crap goes away. And you actually... certainly on second viewing, I found I did get invested in the characters and I did care about them. So when we got to the finale, it worked for me. But boy, do you have to work hard to like this movie. The soundtrack does not make it easy for you to like this movie.
No, not at all. And I've never watched a movie where the score enhances the acting and makes the acting feel horrible at the same time. Like, I felt like especially the first quarter of the film, Matthew Broderick's character, Gaston, his acting just felt very wooden and very... He was doing an accent that worked sometimes but didn't work other times, and everything he said had no emotion whatsoever. But then when it got to the second half of the film and there was more orchestral score, it seemed to bring out the emotions of his acting, and it felt convincing, and you really did start caring about the characters. You saw character development with Gaston and also with Navarre, and you could see the torment between the two lovers. And I feel like that was primarily because of the score. And it's really strange. It was such a strange experience watching this movie.
It is.
Because there were so many scenes that I loved, but then there were scenes that I outright just hated.
Yeah, it's a really good example. If you want to see how much of an impact a score has on a movie, watch Ladyhawke. Because, yes, I don't think Matthew Broderick's performance particularly changes as the film progresses, and I doubt it was filmed sequentially anyway, because films very rarely are. So I think his performance is sort of the same all the way through. Well, maybe it changes when he's on his own versus when he's with Rutger Hauer. I think and Michelle Pfeiffer. I think they do play off each other. Sort of similar to we were saying with Warwick Davis in Willow.
I got that too.
Yeah, so he's very wooden in the beginning when he's with the rest of the little people, and then when he's with Val Kilmer, it really kicks up a notch. So I think there is some element of that. But yes, the scenes where the rock music is it just tears apart their performances. You just don't believe in them anymore.
No.
And then the scenes where it's orchestrally scored, it sort of starts to move you. There are some moments in this that I found really moving.
Yes.
But it really does show what all elements of a film, editing, lighting, sound, and music, play such an important part in building a performance and creating a story and a character. I mean, Andrew Powell has a good point in his defense. He says that 19th century romantic music is just as anachronistic to 13th century Europe as late 70s prog rock. That there really is no difference between the two. It's just, as David Bruckner was saying last week when we were talking about sound, that there is no reality. These are just methods of conveying information. You know, if you were going to do 13th century, it would be a lute and a recorder or something. It would be terrible.
Yes.
But just the convention of using a classical orchestra just tells people this is the past. I don't know. It just sort of conveys that to audiences. And not doing that, having music that is, I don't know, supposed to be cutting edge, but I think it was already dated when they did it. And it so dates it now. It's, the music, it made me so angry.
Yeah, it really did. Some of the later scenes with orchestral music, and they incorporated synth, that really did work. And it read the mood, it read the mood of the scene and delivered that mood. Whereas, all of that rock stuff at the start really did not read the room.
No. Or the pace, or, when you've got a scene where somebody's trying to escape an underwater dungeon, you've just got boom, doom, boom, doom, boom. What? Where's the sense of urgency here? Just to completely destroy the rhythm of a scene as well. It's just baffling.
Yeah. I just had a big problem with the first half of the film. It felt clumsy. Like, I'm not even talking about just the score. Like, even there's one scene with Gaston, and he's in this peasant village, and the guard guy and his henchmen are there, and Gaston's trying to get away. And yes, the score is horrible in that scene, but I felt like it was filmed in a very boring way as well. So I mean, I complain about having lots of cuts, but this scene really didn't have many cuts at all. And because it wasn't a stuntman, it was just Matthew Broderick, and it was just like quite a uneventful scene that I felt a little bit embarrassed for them, because it just looked too choreographed. Like, he was getting away when these guys were swinging swords at him, and it wasn't convincing. And there were quite a few scenes like that in the first half of the film that were just a little bit boring to watch. Not very well shot, not very interesting angles. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. And from the director of the Lethal Weapon trilogy, which, if you want a textbook example of how to do action movies, Richard Donner knows what he's doing. So, yeah, I didn't understand how clunky the inn scene was. But the interesting thing is that I think the horseback escape after the inn scene, where Navarre is riding along and Gaston is trying to get away and he plucks him off the ground and throws him over the horse, and then they jump over something and punches a guard in the face as he rides past. All of that stuff is really well done and exciting.
I mean, I don't understand. There just seems to be a huge range of quality in this movie. There are some scenes that were just utter crap to watch and it almost felt like very, very B-grade movie. And then other scenes that were amazing and just a feast for the eyes. Like that final scene with the big fight between Navarre and Marquet, and they're both on horseback. They're swinging swords. They're inside a church. There's light coming from this window, and there's an eclipse, and it's this really strange, moody lighting. And then there are all these monks just kind of standing to one side. And it's a visually stunning scene, and it's very well choreographed in terms of the fight, and I was very amazed and impressed by it. But then there was just such a range of quality with every scene, and acting, lighting, everything, production. I don't know, it was so hard to really gauge whether I even enjoyed watching the film or not.
Yeah, I mean, visually, it has to be said, the film does look incredible a lot of the time. I mean, the cinematographer is Vittorio Storaro, who has won an Oscar for Apocalypse Now and for Reds and The Last Emperor. He knows what he's doing, and his extensive use of color filters.
Yeah, I did like that.
Throughout this film. It's sort of the way they did this kind of thing before we had digital color grading. So you would just have, I don't know, is it glass, sheets of glass and gels that they put over the lens?
I think so.
Yeah, and it just, so you'll often see these scenes where the sky is sort of tinged pink in the furthest reaches and the corners, and it's because they've put these colored gels over the lens. And it's all shot on location in Italy, near Aquila. It just looks stunning. You go through lots of locations like foggy forests at night, a fantastic castle. Imperius is in this ruined castle, and there's a fantastic shot when you first get there where the sun is setting just through like a hole in the wall. It's just sumptuous, some of it. It just really is beautiful to look at, and all the production value is there. Oh, the mountain scenes as well. There are scenes on mountain ranges, and this, in terms of production value, it looks incredible.
Yeah, like you said, the locations were just amazing. I mean, that's one thing I love about 80s fantasy. They go to real locations and everything just looks stunning and interesting, and all the castles are real castles, they're not sets, and everything looks tangible. Everything looks like you could reach out and touch it. Nothing looks fake. As I've said before, I have a huge dislike of CGI fantasy these days because nothing looks real. And yeah, great use of fog machines and the filters as well. And even the costumes were like really, really good. And I felt like they were going places in terms of locations. Like it didn't feel like it was just one spot that were just shooting in different angles.
Yeah, it felt like an epic journey was going on. It's kind of the difference between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Lord of the Rings looks like an epic journey because of all these gorgeous locations across New Zealand that they used. And you can tell that they're really there. It's as gritty as it gets and as stunning as it gets, some of it digitally enhanced. And whereas The Hobbit, to me, it just looks like they're in front of a green screen throughout the whole movie.
Yes.
None of it has any air to it at all. It just looks entirely plastic and fake.
Yes. I mean, in terms of the plot of the film, I actually quite liked it.
Yeah.
Is it based on an actual myth, legend, fairy tale?
No, I don't think so. I think the original story writer, Edward Kamara, actually sued somebody because they said
Oh.
that this was based on a myth, and I think he sued and won. So yeah, we should be careful of that. But he's, I think it's entirely an original creation, and the script was reworked by Richard Donner's frequent collaborator, Tom Mankiewicz, who worked on Superman and numerous other things with him. So yeah, the story's really good. It's much worse than the star-crossed lovers of Romeo and Juliet, that these two people are eternally together, forever apart, as Matthew Broderick puts it halfway through the movie, which is that, they're in each other's presence, but they're never even able to touch each other except for this brief moment as the sun is setting or rising, where they just sort of cross over and they almost get to see each other, but not quite. And it's a lovely idea. I mean, you've got your evil figure, which is the bishop, who, he's only painted in very broad strokes. He's just a jealous, power-hungry man.
I found his character was very similar to the Emperor in Star Wars for some reason.
Yeah.
He had a very similar voice as well.
Yeah, just cookie-cutter evil.
Yeah.
He was very quietly menacing. I love this thing that John Wood had it's in the script, obviously, but he has this thing where people will say things to him and he will just simply say yes and nothing else.
Yeah.
And it's so menacing. Like the guy, what was his name? Marquet would say to him, I'm really sorry that Gaston has escaped, but I will scour the countryside and make sure that we capture him again. And the bishop just looks at him and says, yes. And you think, I don't want to know what the consequences are if I don't manage to do this.
I think I could be wrong, but so full disclosure, as a teenager, I used to watch Charmed. And I'm pretty sure there was an episode that had this exact story.
Really?
So there were two lovers and one would turn into some animal, and the other one by day, and then by night the other one would turn into an animal. I don't know whether they took it directly from this or maybe there's a similar story, but yeah, I could be completely wrong. But anyway, Charmed.
I have never seen Charmed.
That's one show that has dated terribly. It is
Really?
not good to watch now.
No.
Do not watch it.
Okay.
As well as a story, I actually really enjoyed some of the characters as well. You mentioned the evil bishop. He had a very sinister presence all the time. And I really enjoyed the Navarre character and as well Isabeau as well. I thought they really brought the movie to life, and their torment and their love for each other just seems so real.
Yes.
And believable.
Yeah, I mean, Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer are no slouches, obviously. I mean, this is quite early in their career. Hauer had just done Blade Runner, and then all of a sudden he's a romantic lead. But yeah, I mean, nobody does cold, brooding, serious man of action, but also with a big heart. He's always passionate, isn't he, Rutger Hauer? And if you want mysterious and beautiful, but also capable and strong, then Michelle Pfeiffer, you're not going to go too far wrong, are you? And this is relatively early in her career too. I think she'd done Scarface.
Yeah.
The characters are good, and of course there's Imperious as well, Leo McKern as the monk, the constantly drunk monk.
I expected him to be just, the comic relief. The character they bring in halfway through that doesn't really change anything and it's just a bit silly. But he had so much depth to his character.
Yeah.
He was a drunk, but he had so much guilt. He wanted to kind of redeem himself and break the curse, and his character was surprisingly complex.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because of course he's responsible for what, or at least he feels responsible because he's the reason that the evil bishop found out about the love between Navarre and Isabeau. So he feels directly responsible for what happens to them and thus redeemed by being part of the plan to break the curse and save them. And then you've got Matthew Broderick, who, this is just before Ferris Bueller, after War Games, in which he also appeared with John Wood, although not an evil bishop in this case. The thing with Matthew Broderick's performance in this is initially I was irritated by it. It feels very much like he's doing an early draft of Ferris Bueller, because he's not breaking the fourth wall. He's not looking directly at the camera, but he does keep delivering these extended monologues to himself. They're very funny, it has to be said, and he does deliver them with aplomb. And he's talking to God. So Gaston is having this constant dialogue with God. And it's sort of irksome, and he has a very sort of twitchy, bird-like mannered performance to him early on. But actually, after the first act, that sort of goes away. You get sort of 5 or 6 monologues to God in the opening act. And then when he's with Navarre and Isabeau, it deepens his character. The monologues stop because he has somebody to talk to, presumably. And he sort of redeems himself. And I think his character is supposed to be arrogant, headstrong. I mean, he goes to the inn right at the beginning after he's escaped and starts boasting about how he's just escaped and then puts himself in danger again. So I think he's foolish and selfish and arrogant and headstrong to begin with, and also cowardly and entirely selfish. And one of the things that's most impressive about how the film develops is how he completely changes as the film progresses. In fact, I don't think any other character changes as much as he does, and I actually think Matthew Broderick conveys that really well.
I don't know. I found him irritating.
All the way through?
I did enjoy him the second half, but I found the first half wasn't convincing for me.
No.
I don't know what it is with Americans doing accents, but they really can't. And his accent just came and went. They were pseudo-British. I found the monologues so irritating. I just did not like them. Because often it was telling us, the viewer, exactly what he was doing, exactly what he was thinking. And I hate that in movies. I don't want to be spoon-fed exposition and plot. I just want to watch it, and you don't need to tell me physically what's happening. And yeah, I did find it annoying. I mean, I understand what they were trying to do with his talking to God, and it was kind of this running gag. But I don't know.
It didn't work for you.
I didn't like it. It didn't work for me. I didn't really start enjoying the movie. Even Rutger Hauer's when he appears for the first time, I didn't find that great either. I felt his character was a bit stiff, and especially because I think he first appears in a fight scene, and that fight scene is a bit stiff as well, and clunky. And it actually wasn't until Michelle Pfeiffer's character appeared that I really started investing in the characters. And she had a very noticeable presence, and the way they lit her and put makeup on her, it was almost luminous. She was glowing. She really just jumped off the screen. And then you saw the torment with Navarre and Isabeau, and then you saw the change with Gaston, and that's when the movie got interesting. Previously, before that, I was groaning the whole way.
Yeah,
it's wanting every scene to end as soon as possible.
No, I'm glad you used that word luminous. That's exactly what I wrote down in my notes as well, that there is a scene where the cinematographer is using a combination of pink for the sunset and blue for the night. All of the night scenes are very blue, which is very 80s, but also it's a fantastic image. I mean, he does it really well.
Yeah.
But because he's lighting Michelle Pfeiffer pink on one side and blue on the other, she ends up this kind of luminous purple. And that sounds awful, but actually it's eye-popping to look at. I mean, especially I have the Warner Brothers Archive Collection Blu-ray, which has been remastered and retouched, and it just looks incredible. So yeah, she does look incredible, and she's not. I read an interview with Michelle Pfeiffer about the movie, and she was saying that Richard Donner Mayweller thought she was difficult because She had no interest in playing a beautiful princess romping through the woods with long tresses and a flowing white gown. And so for a lot of the movie, I was feeling a little bit awkward for her because she's only described in terms of how she looks. She's just described as this thing with porcelain skin or alabaster skin, with the eyes of a dove, with the eyes of a bird. And nobody ever says who she is or any kind of... She never has any character traits. But there is a portion in the middle of the movie where she actually saves Navarre's life. And she's wearing boy's clothes. She defies Gaston. She leaves the stable at an inn on Navarre's horse and goes after César, who is a wolf hunter played by Alfred Molina, or Molina, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name.
Such a tiny character for such a renowned actor as well.
For such a, well, it's early days again for him, I guess.
Yeah,
but
I guess
I don't know, he'd been in Raiders of the Lost Ark, because that was, what, 82? So yeah, he should have gotten a bigger part than this.
Like
it felt as though that should have been a bigger role anyway, because they say, get me César. And you think, oh my God, I can't wait for this guy to turn up. He's obviously serious. He shows up in 2 scenes. It's like the scene where he's introduced, scene where he dies.
Yeah.
That's it.
And he shows up and he's just a hairy guy with a Cockney accent.
Yeah. What's this about? But
I don't know.
But yes, he's killed by Isabeau, and not by accident. She deliberately engineers a situation whereby he's killed and she saves the wolf. So she is not without agency. She is not without guts and action and courage of her own. So yeah, she's a really interesting character.
Now it's time for Random Trivia.
So Dan, what do you have by way of random trivia about Ladyhawke?
For some reason with fantasy films, it's always animal trivia. So with Ladyhawke, as the name suggests, it does feature a real live hawk. There were several used. One that sits on Navarre's arm, and one for all the flying shots where the hawk just majestically flies over everything. But apparently there was one hawk that they did use that they just couldn't use any of the footage for the actual film because it took quite a liking to Rutger Hauer. It used to ruffle its feathers all the time. And so it used to puff up and look like a chicken. So it didn't look like this majestic, predatorial creature, but more like a big fluffy rooster or something.
And that's all because of Rutger Hauer's sexual magnetism, is it?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I can buy that.
Yeah.
He's a very handsome man. No, I saw an interview with Lauren Schuler Donner, or Lauren Schuler as she was at the time they made Ladyhawke. She's the producer.
Ah, yes.
And she was saying that the horse wasn't a movie horse. It was a show horse. And I think you can see that because when it's trotting along, it's doing that thing where it's really lifting its hooves up, and it's very pretty.
I don't understand why they chose that horse, because every time Rutger Hauer would do this big manly saunter off into the distance on his horse, it would trot along like in some sort of equestrian show or something. Ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it rears well, has to be said. I mean, all the rearing was great.
The rearing was great. I mean, even in that very last scene as well, where he's supposed to make this grand entrance trotting into this cathedral.
It's so funny. It's not really the kind of image that they were probably going for, I'm sure.
No, not at all.
Also, it would sort of step from foot to foot during dialogue scenes where Rutger Hauer was trying to deliver dialogue, and also the hawk that they managed to get that wouldn't fluff up because it found him sexy. The one that would just sit there did have a horrible habit every time he spoke of smacking him in the mouth with its wing.
Oh, yes.
So he's trying to deliver this serious dialogue while his horse is sort of shifting from leg to leg as though it needs a pee. And the hawk keeps slapping him every time he says something. So, yes, children and animals, always fun.
Yes.
Marvellous. And that's our random trivia.
Yeah.
structurally, I think the film is really interesting in the way that it holds back, showing you the full extent of their anguish, showing you the moment where they almost get to see each other in their human form at the same time and touch each other, but not quite. And it's not the first time you see them transforming. That happens a couple of times before, and it's always fairly impressionistic and subtle. And there aren't any big makeup effects or Rutger wolfing out, or
there's no morphing in this one. No,
no, it's just very surreal and suggestive. And
lots of double exposure.
Yeah, I kind of wish those were a bit better, but it is what it is.
I actually thought they were kind of done well. They used what they had and they made it aesthetically pleasing. It wasn't. Yeah. They didn't have any half wolf, half man, or like half bird, half woman, because that could have looked very hammy, and obviously it would have dated even more. So I kind of like the dissolve and the double exposure and that sort of optical effects rather than having like prosthetics,
the abstract approach,
or something like that.
Yeah. But I love that they hold back on showing you that moment until after one of my favourite sequences, which is the one where they try to trap Navarre in wolf form, because Navarre doesn't believe in Imperious's plan, his prophecy, and is determined to just kill the bishop. So Isabeau, who's been convinced by Gaston, collaborates with them to try to trap the wolf, and they dig this trap for him, and Isabeau is there as bait, and the wolf is slowly walking across this frozen lake because they're up in the mountains somewhere. And all of the suspense is focused on, will they trap the wolf or not? And all of a sudden, the wolf falls through the ice, and suddenly the scene completely changes to one where they're just desperately trying to rescue the wolf. So Gaston has to jump into the icy water and rescue Navarre, and gets pretty clawed up in the process. And after all of that sound and fury, you get this moment of dialogue-free calm where the sun is rising and Isabeau is curled up asleep with the wolf by her side in the trap, which is kind of ironic. And as the sun rises, she slowly turns into the hawk, and Navarre slowly comes back from the wolf. And there's this moment where they cross over and they can almost see each other in pure human form. They can almost touch, but then the hawk flies away and the moment is lost. And Navarre lets out this unbelievable, anguished scream. And I just thought it was so clever to have that right before. That's the end of the second act. That's right before we go into the final confrontation, and it really ramps up the jeopardy, your investment in the outcome for these characters. So structurally, I think it's very clever the way that it's been written.
And also that scene, they throw everything at it as well. So it's a very iridescent scene. So it's very bright yellows and everything is golden and radiant, and the score is actually amazing at that point as well.
It's good.
And
it's really good.
And it's just a really powerful scene. And I feel like there were quite a few scenes like that really made you feel like there was something at stake in the movie. I felt every time someone died very brutally, I was like, oh shit, people died in this film. Because apart from that, people kind of swung their swords around and it was all fun and games with rock music in the background. But there's one scene where I quite liked the scene in the ruined castle with Imperius, and the henchmen guards have arrived and they're chasing Gaston and Isabeau, and they're on the top of the tower, and this guard is about to swing a sword or something, and he gets crossbowed by Navarre, and then the guard falls to his death, and you see him hit the ground, and it's really quite confronting and like quite brutal way to die. Because normally it's just like, and you don't see any, or they just land in water or something like that. And similarly, when the César character dies, he gets his head caught in a bear trap that pretty much just slices his head off, I guess.
Well, it chokes him because he's struggling for ages, isn't he?
Oh, right. Yes. You hear this kind of guttural sound, and it's sickening.
Yeah.
But yeah, that serious tone I really enjoyed, and all the other funny quips and stupid action scenes just did not do it for me, and it really brought me out of it.
Yeah, well, the scene in Imperious's place is quite interesting as a contrast because you have the sort of comedy with Imperious with all of his booby traps and letting the guards fall through the gangway across the moat or whatever it is because he keeps saying walk to the left, and then when the guards come he says walk to the right, and you see why, because they fall through it.
Yes.
So you've got all that silly stuff, and then you've got the scene on the top of the tower with Gaston and Isabeau where they're fighting with the guard, and accidentally Isabeau is pitched over the side and Gaston is holding on to her, but she's clearly going to fall, and she falls, and you've completely forgotten about the fact that the sun is about to rise. And the sun just peeps up over the horizon, and then you have a transformation montage, and the hawk flies away. So, and that's really good. I thought that was really well orchestrated, that whole sequence. So it's sort of a mix between the serious stuff with her in peril and the sort of comedic, silly guards being bonked on the head and falling over kind of stuff.
Yeah. I do agree that scene was pretty well executed.
Yeah. It's a mixture all the time. And I do think watching Gaston go from this headstrong guy who's irritating and cowardly to somebody who will rescue Navarre as the wolf from the ice. Mainly, I think, in that case, because he wants to help Isabeau, he's doing it on her behalf. But then after seeing the two of them and their anguish, becomes more invested in their well-being and them being together than in his own safety, and thus does everything that he does in the third act just to bring them together. I think shows a huge amount of maturity and a huge shift in the character, and despite Broderick's wonky British accent that comes and goes, I really bought into it. I thought it was sort of the heart of the movie, really.
I mean, I think the final scene was the best scene, and everything kind of culminated to that scene. And I really loved the outcome, and I really loved how Isabeau walks in and Navarre was about to kill the bishop, and then he realizes that the curse is broken, and the lighting, and it's a really powerful scene. And then he kills the bishop because he does the thing that this is what always happens in fantasy movies, because you can't just kill the bad guy outright.
No,
the bad guy needs to have a last minute swing, and then he's forcing the good guy to kill him, and he throws his gigantic sword at him that's far too long for anyone to actually wield.
The balance on that thing must be terrible.
I know. And impales the bishop on this chair, and it's a really confronting death as well. And yeah, great scene. Just an overall just amazing final 10 minutes or whatever of the film.
Yeah. It's a great finale, and Broderick is weeping because he's so happy for them, and you feel that way as well as the audience. And it's incredible they've managed to build up stakes and build up an investment in this relationship when you've never seen them together at all. And it really works, and you're really invested in it. And when he's lifting her up into the sunlight and they're spinning around, it's really happy.
Yeah.
And then the credits roll, and on comes the shitty rock music again. and my hackles go up, and I think, why? Why did you do this? Richard Donner's worked with John Williams. He's worked with Michael Kamen. He's worked with Jerry Goldsmith even on The Omen, for which Jerry won his only Oscar. Why would he do this? I don't understand it. So
I don't understand either.
So we're sort of right back to where we started. quite poetically.
Yeah.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Okay, so it's that very special time where we nominate a bunch of our favorite things in a number of completely useless categories. So we always started off with favorite quote. So Conrad, many great quotes in this film. What was your favorite?
Actually, the quote that made me laugh the most came from Imperious, and it was the scene where Gaston first arrives at the castle, the one with the beautiful shot that I mentioned, and he's holding this hawk with a crossbow bolt sticking out of it and says, "I've got this bird," and Imperious says, "Oh good, come on up, we'll eat it," and Gaston says, "No, we can't eat this bird," and Imperious says, "What? Oh God, is it Lent again already?"
He was hilarious in that first scene where he appears. Like, just a great character, really great character.
Really good. How about you?
So yeah, my favorite quotes were more in the serious tone. I really quite liked a lot of quotes from the bishop. Everything he said was just really menacing and sinister. But I will say that my favorite quote was when Gaston meets Isabeau for the first time. He asks her, "Are you flesh or are you a spirit?" And then she replies, "I am sorrow." It's such a tortured soul. So much torment.
She is, yeah.
Yes.
She's just nothing but sorrow. That's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, just a great line.
Indeed. So, 80s. What is the most 80s aspect of this movie?
Well, might be a bit obvious, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, there is an obvious candidate. I actually am going to go for Ferris Bueller because I can't think. I'm inspired by you saying that Rupert Everett was the most 90s thing in Della Morte, Della More. So I'm going to say having Ferris Bueller almost breaking the fourth wall and talking to himself for large stretches of this film is very, very 80s.
Yeah.
Quite iconic anyway. How about you?
I mean, I have to say the obvious thing for the most 80s was the music was just, terrible.
Yeah, I still would put in an argument to say that even the 80s was past that music. But how about hair and or costume?
I quite liked the costume from Navarre. He was kind of the Dark Knight sort of get-up. He wasn't the shining suit of armor. He wasn't wearing white. He was wearing black and red, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it really was reflective of his kind of brooding nature. So yeah, and his very fancy black horse.
Yes, his fancy black horse prancing along. No, it's quite good, isn't it? Because it's very practical for a guy that's spending most of his time outdoors, and he's got this black outer layer, but inside this passionate red. Yeah. I think it's quite good. For me, it would have to be César's hair. I think he just shows up with a man, he's just crying out for conditioner. It's just this dry bird's nest it looks like it's got leaves in it. It's a forest fire waiting to happen on his head. It looks terrible.
Yeah, I think he had a monobrow as well. I mean, they just really went all out and just putting as much hair on him as possible.
Yeah, he looks hideous, bless him.
Yes.
It's quite something. Favorite scene? What would be your favorite scene?
Well, I mentioned it before. That last fight scene between Navarre and Marquet. Just absolutely amazing scene. Just great lighting, visually stunning, great fight choreography, and yeah, so good.
Yeah.
And yours, Conrad?
Mine, I think, is the sequence with the wolf falling through the ice and them rescuing. And I was so surprised by that, and so surprised by how emotionally invested in it I was. I thought it worked really well. And it also helped that it was such a fantastic location outside. in amongst the mountains. Must have been, is it the Alps? It must be the Alps, mustn't it?
I think I looked it up, and I think it's the Dolomite Ranges, which is just this big mountain range in Italy. I think it borders Italy and Austria, but could be wrong. Okay. It's funny actually, because me and my wife went to Italy recently. We went to Verona primarily, but we did do a lot of day trips around, and I looked up the locations for this movie, and a lot of the locations were around the northern part of Italy near Verona. We didn't go to those places though, but we went to pretty much every other township in and around, but just not those ones. So I felt so annoyed that we hadn't gone to any of those. It was a stunning location anyway.
It's a stunning location and a really good scene, and I love what it does in terms of the character development for Gaston, especially that lovely moment when he's arguing with Navarre and Navarre throws him to the ground. His tunic falls open and you see all the scars on his chest. And Navarre realizes how much he's hurt him and that he did it to save him. So all of a sudden their relationship changes. I just thought, oh, this is good. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
Loved it.
It was good.
Most cliched fantasy moment.
I guess it was the just tremendous amount of animals all the time. I think it's fantasy. They got to have animals, right? So a lot of wolves and hawks and chickens and goats and a menagerie of animals, really.
Yeah. I think for me, it would either have to be the fact that there's a prophecy, because there's always a prophecy.
Yes.
But I think for me, it would have to be the British accents. Again, it's one of these things, it's symbolic rather than factual. Because it's set in Italy, right? So they should be speaking Italian or something.
Oh, of course.
Or
Latin.
Or yeah, exactly. But they just go for, well, we can't be American, so we'll just go for British, because at least that's European.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Michelle Pfeiffer doesn't do too bad. Rutger Hauer just goes with the accent that he's got.
He doesn't even try, yes.
He doesn't do anything. Broderick just wobbles all over the shop. And my favourite is where, and it completely destroys a scene where he's trying to tell Navarre that he has no reason to be jealous of him because all she ever talks about is him. And when she talks about him, he says that she glowed, but he says glued. she positively glued.
Oh.
I don't know what vowel sound that is, but it's wrong.
Oh dear.
Terrible British accents.
Special effect. So Conrad, what was yours?
And mine, actually, I'm assuming it's a special effect, or at least I'm hoping it is. It's during that wonderful scene in the woods where Philippe and Navarre are sort of laying their motivations on the table. Navarre's going back to the castle. Philippe doesn't want to go. He'd rather die. He says, I know I'm a coward. I know I have no honor. I don't think he'll kill me for being who I am, but I'd much rather be dead than go back to Aquila. And he turns around in the same shot where he's delivered all of this dialogue. He turns around, walks away from the camera, and yes, Navarre's massive sword flies through the frame and lands and buries itself quite a few inches into the tree and just sits there wobbling millimeters away from Broderick's head. And Broderick just turns around and says, I'll gather the firewood. So he's not going anywhere.
How did they do that, though?
I don't know how they did it. I watched it frame by frame because I thought maybe they did that thing that they used to do with arrows in the old Robin Hood movies where the arrows are already in the tree and they're sort of hidden and they sort of ping up on cue and wobble around. And so I looked, but no, if you do it frame by frame, it enters screen left. It actually comes into the shot and flies through the frame and lands millimeters away from Broderick. And there's no mark on the tree before where it hits. So I'm hoping it's an effect, but maybe they just threw it.
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out either. I was actually quite shocked by that.
It is, yeah. It's a great effect.
Just knowing there's no CGI at the time, so...
No.
Wow. Matthew Broderick, props to you for not shitting your pants.
Well, exactly. He went through it in this movie. He was cold a lot of the time and wet, and yeah, hats off to him. Well done.
So what about sound effect? What was your favorite?
I didn't have a favorite necessarily, but I certainly had a least favorite sound.
Yes.
Back to that again. Yeah, at the beginning, again, one of the many things that irritated me at the beginning of the movie and pulled me out of it, apart from the terrible music and everything else, was the horrible sort of phased synth swooshing effects that dominated the soundtrack when Gaston kept falling through tunnels.
Yes.
And also when the hawk flies through after the really underwhelming fighting sequence. I don't know if it's part of the music or I think it's part of the sound design, and they're sort of phasing because they're badly mixed or they did it on purpose. It's horrible. I hate it.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah, it's almost like they did music and sound design for a sci-fi, but it wasn't a sci-fi. It was a fantasy. So or having all these kind of sounds just didn't really fit.
No, it was just another thing that pulled me out of the movie at the beginning and made it very difficult for me to settle into it.
Yeah.
How about you, sound designer extraordinaire?
I actually found most of it was pretty good. Nothing really stood out, but I guess I did notice the excessive use of wolf and hawk sounds. And I don't know whether they really tried hard enough to find enough sounds, but it did really sound like stock sounds to me. I'm pretty sure I've got some of the same wolf sounds in my collection that I've bought from stock libraries. And obviously we have the red-tailed hawk screech again. That is just so synonymous with all films, really, whether it be a cowboy movie or a fantasy movie. You've always got that iconic screech sound, but because a hawk is throughout the movie, you hear that sound over and over and over and over again.
So, funniest scene. Is there a scene that made you chuckle the most?
So, not a specific scene, but I've mentioned it before. Every scene with Navarre's prancing horse just made me laugh hysterically.
Yeah.
And you? Any funny moments?
Oh, for me, it has to be the scene after they've escaped. Navarre and Gaston have escaped the inn, and they're looking for a place to stay the night, and they seem to just sort of wander into Monty Python's Holy Grail for the next scene, because they come across the oddest couple. I don't know if they're meant to be farmers or what it is that they are, but they stay in their stable. And the guy is a monosyllabic grunting axe wielding killer, as it turns out, and his wife is this dumpy little thing that just sort of trots around and bounces around making weird random noises. She's and doesn't speak. I just thought, what the hell is this? That looks like Terry Jones in drag. It really did look like Monty Python and the Holy Grail just suddenly burst spontaneously into the movie. I don't know what that was about.
Her character kind of reminded me of Nagi from the film that we did last episode in Cemetery Man, because his character would only say and all the time. Yeah, very odd character.
Marvelous. And that's our Mooblies.
Yes.
Welcome back, and it's time for us to deliver our final verdict. Dan, do you think Ladyhawke should have the curse broken that's been so cruelly bestowed upon it by a jealous bishop and set free to love once more? Or do you think it should be left to live out its days as a miserable animal and hurled back into the oubliette? What did you think?
I feel like the music was a real deal breaker.
Right.
It destroyed the film. It was a perfectly good, serious tone film that was just completely annihilated because of the music alone. It's so sad because I did love so many of the scenes. I feel like they should rescore the movie. If it was rescored, it would be an amazing film to watch, but no. No, I don't think people should sit through that. It's not enjoyable as it is in its current state. No, not at all.
Yeah, it is a terrible shame, isn't it? It's like a moustache on the Mona Lisa. It's just it just destroys the whole thing. I mean, not that I think that this is in any way the Mona Lisa. It's not a classic. It's not a fantastic, outstanding movie for the ages. Is it a good genre movie? I think it sort of is. I mean, it's got incredible production design, incredible cinematography. It's directed by Richard Donner. I think the three leads, or four if you include Leo McKern, do a really good job of their characters, and it's a lovely story that you can get emotionally invested in once you've gotten out of the first act and all of the terrible music. But yeah, I'm with you. I really do wish that somebody would go back and redo the score for this movie and then release it again, like on an alternative track, so you can switch if you want to.
Yeah.
Because, oh, it's so bad. And it makes me so angry every time I hear that music starting up. I got so irrationally angry at the screen, almost threw my remote at the TV. There's a lot to be admired, but I don't think I would recommend it to anybody. I think there are better movies in this genre from this decade even, some of which I think are even less well thought of than Ladyhawke, and I don't think they deserve to be. So yeah, I think I will stand firm with you and help you throw this sucker back in there.
Let's throw it back in.
Okay, let's just see if I can wrangle it before it flaps away. Oh, it's fighting me a bit.
Cool.
And down. I feel sad about that because there were some lovely moments in it.
There really were, but I can't forgive that music. I can't. It's unforgivable. It
really is. Oh dear. So Dan, do we have something that's more musically tolerable to look forward to for the next episode?
Well, the next episode was actually chosen by our special guest that will be joining us next time. It's a sci-fi drama from 2011. It is Melancholia. It's a film directed by Lars von Trier, who I know a lot of people dislike. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. But we will have a third person to add some insight. So looking forward to it.
Yes. Our first actor and a lady.
Oh, spoilers, Conrad.
Yes. It won't be a sausage fest next time.
No. We can't talk about our macho cars and firearms.
No, we'll have to put pants on next time. Well, I can't wait.
Me too.
In the meantime, if you'd like to chat to us about Ladyhawke, about our verdict, do you think we were unusually cruel to it just for the sake of its terrible music? Then do let us know. Or if you have suggestions for what sort of films we should cover in future episodes, we would love to hear from you.
Or if you have any questions regarding our doppelgangers in other podcasts, we welcome them as well.
We do. And we are Movie Oubliette everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And if you're not sure how to spell oubliette, it is Oubliette.
Sorry, it's a bit of a zoo in here. Can you repeat that, please?
Oubliette. Yes, and we are movie.oubliette@gmail.com because I fouled up when I signed up our account, basically. Sorry about that.
Can't forget that dot.
No, don't forget that dot. But we would love to get your emails too. So yes, please get in touch and rate and review us on iTunes and subscribe. Yes, mash that subscribe button. That's a very important thing too. It all helps.
It all helps. You have no idea how much it helps. Because how else will people know how good we are?
I know. They'll be totally bereft. It's not fair. Think of other people.
Exactly.
Okay, so thanks for listening, and don't forget to join us next time when we will be talking about melancholia with a lovely lady. Bye for now.
Bye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
What? Oh, God, is it Lent again already?